everyone. Happy Friday. So, we have not done an episode on what's happening in libtard blue states for a while. And usually, when we do, I think we focus on New York. But, Stephanie, today, I want to talk about some completely idiotic shit that's happening in my home state of California, which thank God I don't live there anymore.
Oh God, I'm sure
But
it's going to be crazy.
yeah, so I know we mentioned this one a while back, but there's been this like ongoing controversy in California about making reparations to Black Americans in the state who are descendants of slaves, even though California was never a slave owning state. And a while ago, San Francisco had planned to give like $5 million lump sum payments to each slave descendant. And they even created an Office of Reparations. But then back in February, they realized, surprise, they didn't have the budget for it. So instead, they shut down the Office of Reparations and they offered the Black community like a formal apology for the city's past racist laws and policies. But the push for reparations did not end there. So in Alameda County, which is part of the Bay Area near San Francisco, there's something new that formed. It's called the Reparations Commission, and they were formed in March of 2023, and they are still trying to develop a reparations repayment plan for Black Americans in California. And they were initially given a budget of $51,000 to figure out how the county could make these reparations payments. So they're basically paying people to figure out how to pay people. But earlier this week, it was reported by the Daily Caller that they're behind schedule and they say that they're underfunded. So now they're asking for $5 million as a budget, which is 100 times larger than their original budget. And they want an additional 2 years to continue their research, which was supposed to have been completed by this July. Never mind that Alameda County is a financial shit show with a deficit that's going to be between like $70 million and $100 million this year, according to the County Board of Supervisors. And then on top of that, there's also a separate state reparations task force that was created back in 2020. And they came up with like 100 recommendations for the state. And they're continuing to push for $800 billion in reparations payments, which is completely fucking insane. That's like 3 times higher than the state's budget. And by the way, California is already in debt with a deficit of at least like $27.6 billion. So I was reading in the Washington Examiner that this week, California's Legislative Black Caucus went on like they're starting their statewide tour where they're going to like different cities within the state, and they're arguing for 14 different reparations bills, including 2 proposed constitutional amendments, one of which is to outlaw prison labor because they're calling that indentured servitude. So the California Constitution has an amendment that prohibits slavery except as punishment for a crime, which is how like corrections facilities can require inmates to do jobs like be on fire crews or clean up trash on the side of the highway. And they tried to change this law back in 2022, but it didn't even make it onto the ballot. Well, this year, the California Senate has already passed 3 of the 14 reparations bills. There's Senate Bill 1403, which is intended to create an agency to help administer reparations. Like, did I not already mention like 3 agencies?
Yeah.
Then there's Senate Bill 1050, which would establish a way of restoring property or giving financial compensation to descendants of slaves who had their homes seized and what they're calling race-based eminent domain. And then Senate Bill 1331, which would set up funding in the state treasury to finance reparation initiatives approved by Newsom and state legislators. Now, the vote for ballot measures isn't until June 27th. So I guess we'll see what fucking nonsense the people of California decide to do with this reparation shit.
It sounds more like either a money laundering scheme or like they're just paying to like keep their job going. Like whoever's on this board of reparations, like, oh, it was 51,000, but now we need 5 million. It's like you're just trying to
And 2 more
buy
years.
a job. Yeah, it's crazy.
Mhm.
And it's like a state that never had slaves is expecting people who never owned slaves to pay for people who never were slaves. I
Mhm.
mean, it's just insane. And like I played that clip, I think it was last week from that California politician, and she was voting no on reparations because she was Asian and her parents immigrated. and she didn't feel like they should have to pay reparations when they aren't even from the US. But what about people like me whose family immigrated here less than a century ago, long after slavery was abolished? And like, not to mention, this is happening in one of the most expensive places to live where homelessness is rampant, but they want to use tax dollars for this. Like it's so unbelievable. It almost seems like it's some mean joke, but it's not. This is reality. But it's like, how about reparations for the people who were assaulted by illegal immigrants and criminals that were let out without bail in California? Like that would be something I could get behind. And here's the facts. There's more slavery now than there ever was back then. And like just look at all the sex slavery that's happening right now within the United States. No one seems to like care about what's happening with that. No one seems to care that 85,000 migrant kids went missing and probably went into some type of human trafficking slavery. No one bats an eye. No, instead, like these are the same people who are supporting a terrorist group that literally still has slaves and women are considered slaves. And here they're supporting it, but they want reparations for something that no one today was ever a part of. I mean, it's like make it make sense. There's no logic here. And I think also it's another ploy to further divide us by race and like possibly for them to win some points with the Black community in this big election year. That's the only thing I
Yeah,
can.
Yeah, I think you're probably right because California isn't the only blue state that's pushing for reparations. Just last week, or this week actually, the city of Chicago announced their own reparations program and task force, and an executive order was signed by Mayor Brandon Johnson. And he gave a press conference on Wednesday in honor of Juneteenth, and he stated, quote, "We're going to invest $500,000 into the study of restoration and reparations for the city of Chicago. $500,000 to study. And why? So they can begin to move in the direction of complete liberation. Like, what the fuck? And I guess New Jersey, they have a reparations council that was just launched last year by the New Jersey Institute for Social Justice. I think New York has something as well. And then I didn't know this, but there's an ongoing reparations program in Evanston, Illinois, that has been giving Black residents cash payments and housing assistance up to $25,000 for Black residents who lived in the city between 1919 and 1969 or to their direct descendants.
I mean, at least their reasoning includes something that happened in the last 100 years or a little more than that. But even so, like, is it fair to make people today pay for something that happened in the 1940s, long before they were born? Like,
Right.
no, it's absurd. And it's what they always do with the Black community. They dangle a carrot in front of them and say, like, oh, we're the Democratic Party. We're going to take care of you. You just keep voting for us. And why people haven't caught on to that, like, I don't know. I mean, you vote for them, they say they're going to give you reparations. They never will, first of all. But what they will give you is more crime, more homelessness, more inflation, and yet people are still dumb enough to vote for them. I don't understand why. And it's like it's no wonder 500,000 people have fled California at this point, and probably Chicago. I didn't look up that number, but I'm sure it's just as bad.
Yeah, I think California is still like leading the country in the state that the most people have left in the last few years. And so let's talk about DEI, right? It is Pride Month. So the California Senate also recently approved a ban on requiring schools to notify parents of a child's gender identity or sexual orientation without the child's permission. And their justification is that they need to protect students whose safety could be threatened if they live in, quote, unwelcoming households. Now, the bill is headed to the state assembly, so it hasn't been completely approved yet, but they're basically saying, yeah, you don't need to tell parents what their kids choose to identify as.
I mean, this just look at the language. Like, if they feel threatened by who? Their own parents? Like, once
Mhm.
again, it's trying to like alienate kids from their parents. And like the state that is literally allowing children to run away from home and live with a stranger in order to get gender affirmation surgery, which has lifelong consequences, is now saying they're worried about kids' safety. Like,
Yeah.
give me a break. I mean, it's 100% about taking away parental rights and indoctrinating children. So, speaking of this, I want to play a clip from Jillian Michaels, who was a guest on Sage Steele's podcast. And she touches on the insanity in California, and it's just epic. So, listen to this clip.
Too crazy for me. Why? Okay. This is my parting line. I grew up here. I'm a woman. I'm a gay woman. My mom's a Jew. My dad's an Arab. I have a black kid. And believe it or not, my son is half Latin, even though he doesn't look like it. I hold a million cards in your game of woke victimology poker. And when I leave California, maybe you've lost your fucking mind. Just maybe. Like when you when you have me running from home, maybe it's gone way too far. What was the line? Like what was it? I guess girl, there's not enough time. And I actually take this line from Bill and Elon Musk, and they're like, I actually haven't changed. Yes. The world around me is shifting, and I haven't moved. So some of these laws that are passing here are absolutely fucking mind-boggling in relation to crime, protecting our kids. Like, we're decriminalizing everything, which arguably I would probably be okay with, but we're not regulating any of it. Right. So it's like, okay, you're going to decriminalize sex work, but only so women can legally loiter on the streets, like not to keep them safe, not to have them pay taxes, not to make them, regularly check for STDs, not to take away the pimps out of the equation. It's like, if you made that argument to me, I'd be like, well, yes, we want, of course. I mean, I could be liberal. I could go there with you. But I grew up this way. But when it's like, oh, and then what we're going to do is we're going to pass a law for LGBTQ rights so that 24-year-old men can sleep with 14-year-old boys and not have to register as a sex offender because it's just not fair to the gays. I'm like, what? It's what? Like, I don't know if you saw that one. That was like, I think early 2020 when they passed that law. Mm-hmm. And I was like, if a 24-year-old man touches my 14-year-old son, I will get a gun and take matters into my own hands. Yes. Like, are you fucking kidding? Or the fact that a 12-year-old child can be put on off-label cancer drugs to irreparably change their body. Again, if my son came to me and said, Mom, my daughter, I think I'm trans, I'd say, okay, like, you want to dress this way? You want me to call you whatever the heck you want me to dress? Fine. Explore it. I love you. I'm cool. Like, do you, as long as we're safe. But we're not changing your body until it's fully developed. I'm sorry. Conversation's over. Can't get a fucking tattoo. Exactly. We're crazy.
Okay, so I think she says it perfectly. I mean,
Yeah.
I had no idea that an adult could date a child in California and they're not a sex offender for that. Like, I had no idea that already passed, according to what she was saying. And the LGBTQ community, like, this is what I mean when I say that it's been hijacked by pedophiles, because this shit isn't normal. And like, I don't think it's representative of the entire community. I think it's been hijacked by these crazy radicals. And this is a little bit off subject, but still on the topic of the whole trans agenda. I was watching TikTok and I come across this dad, and he says he's watching a new movie on Disney Plus with his young children. I think he said his son was 6 years old. And he's like, I don't mean any disrespect to the LGBTQ community, but I personally don't want to teach that to my young children. And I think that there should be labels on kids' programs that say that there is LGBTQ content. And he's like, we have ratings on every movie and every show, on everything you can think of, from foul language even to rude behavior. But we have no warning when there is LGBTQ stuff in a young child show. I mean, we're talking like Disney Junior. And he said, like, it ends up putting him in this situation where he now has to explain sex and sexual orientation to a 6-year-old that has a gazillion questions after seeing this stuff. And I agree. Like, there's no reason that this needs to be in children's programming. There's no reason a young child should be exposed to sexual orientation long before they ever even hit puberty. And I think parents should be able to put on a show that's meant for young children and not have to worry about it being injected with all this LGBTQ stuff. I think there's some deviant purpose behind it. I truly do.
Well, yeah, parents should also be able to send their kids to school and not
Yeah,
have to worry that this agenda is taking place in elementary school classrooms,
right.
which it is. So, yeah, that's a whole other disturbing topic. So, I want to switch now to the world of crime prevention. So, like, what's happening with crime prevention in California? Well, not much except continued rampant crime. According to LAPD crime stats, as of June, homicides have increased by 10.6%, robberies have increased by 17.6%, and robberies at businesses like restaurants, liquor stores, and clothing stores have increased by 43.6%. And this is all since last year.
I was
In
just
Long
going to
Beach,
say, since when? Because we know it's already been increasing. So this is an increase on top of the already increase that we've had since 2020.
yes, these are the numbers
Shoot,
compared to the
this
same
is,
time last year.
that is really bad. It's
Yeah.
really bad. Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Well, it gets worse. In Long Beach, homicides are up 83%. Car thefts are up 52%. In Fresno, homicides are up 133%. And in San Bernardino, shoplifting is up 79%. Again, these statistics are all since last year. And ironically, I don't know if you heard this, Stephanie, but a U.S. Secret Service agent was robbed at gunpoint last Saturday when he was on his way home from an assignment. And this was the same time that Biden was attending that campaign fundraiser with Obama in Los Angeles. So, But Newsom is proposing cuts to public safety because of the deficit while you have this massive increase in crime. So he wants to do a $97 million cut to trial court operations, a $10 million cut to the Department of Justice Division of Law Enforcement, and an $80 million cut to the Department of Corrections. This would include eliminating 4,600 beds across 13 prisons, slashing law enforcement training, and cutting $4.4 million from county probation departments. But do you know what he's proposing increased funding for? How about $1.7 billion for climate change programs related to equity goals? I guess
Of
like no,
course.
no surprise there, right? And apparently, he's also doing some really shady shit to try to keep anti-crime measures off the November ballot. So I want to play this clip from CBS News that came out on Tuesday.
And Democrats at odds, others reaching across the aisle to work together.
And now a CBS 13 News exclusive, investigative reporter Julie Watts obtained emails between the governor's office and initiative leaders, which reveal what led to the breakdown of negotiations. Julie.
Yeah, guys, leaked emails make it clear that the governor's office does not want Californians voting on a retail theft, crime, and homelessness proposition on the November ballot. His chief of staff made it clear she did not want to negotiate a package of crime bills that Democratic leadership are pushing through unless a coalition of crime victims and law enforcement leaders and retailers would agree to pull their ballot measure off the ballot completely until 2026. At issue was the Homelessness, Drug Addiction, and Theft Reduction Act. It's intended to reform Prop 47. That's the 2014 voter-approved law that reduced punishments for drug possession and thefts under $950, which, according to law enforcement and retailers, means even repeat and career thieves and people in possession of hard, lethal drugs now only face misdemeanors, which in California means no time in prison and rarely any time in jail. In fact, officers can't even arrest someone for a misdemeanor unless they witness the crime firsthand. Enter the new ballot proposal. It's been billed as a Republican-led initiative, but it's actually sponsored by a group of victims advocates and business and public safety leaders, including former prominent DAs. Top donors include Walmart and Target, and people have been lining up outside grocery stores to sign the petition, which now has enough signatures to qualify for the ballot. But in these emails, first obtained by CBS News California, it's clear the governor's office doesn't want Californians voting to reform Prop 47 on Election Day this year. The governor's chief of staff, Dana Williamson, tells the coalition's lead negotiator, Greg Totten, the governor is only open to a ballot measure in 2026. Totten says they're only willing to consider amendments on the 2024 ballot. Williamson responds, then there's nothing to talk about, taking a dig at his consultants, who she says haven't won anything in a decade. Good luck. Now, Democratic leadership has its own set of bills that lawmakers can pass without voter approval, which address some, but not all of the issues on the ballot measure. Following the breakdown in negotiations, today Democratic leaders added a so-called poison pill, which would automatically repeal their own crime bills if voters pass the ballot measure in November. Now,
Like, it's that fucking insane.
Oh, I know. I heard about this morning on the Morning Wire podcast. And so, yeah, like since the government is just allowing crime to run rampant, like these business owners and citizens formed these groups and made this initiative. They have 900,000 signatures so far, which is hundreds of thousands more than they actually need to get on the ballot. And again, like this is to fight the Soros funded Prop 47, which is what's allowing all these criminals to like run rampant, like you were saying earlier. And so this would crack down on crime. And like just to give a few examples of what's in it, if someone shoplifts 3 times, it's a felony no matter how much they stole, which I totally agree with. It would also charge drug dealers with homicide if someone dies from overdosing off of their drugs. And it would also make it a felony to be caught with fentanyl while owning a gun. I think those are all reasonable things. And here you have Newsom like fighting it. Like he does not want this on the ballot despite all these signatures. And another thing that he's trying to keep off the ballot is raising taxes. So obviously, California voters are like fed up with the cost of living in California and would probably vote no against raising taxes. So right now, currently, all they need in order to raise taxes is 2/3 of both chambers to vote yes. And this measure would make 2/3 of both chambers, plus the citizens would have to vote on it. The voters would vote on it. And so it would also make it illegal to disguise a tax hike as like a fee or something other than a tax increase, because they love to like basically hide it with a bunch of other stuff on the ballot. So according to the Morning Wire, Newsom has been up against these tax advocate groups and business groups that are fed up, and he's actually suing to keep this off the ballot. And now it's going to the California Supreme Court. Like, this should tell people all they need to know. Okay, you want reparations? Well, here's what you're getting in return. They're taking funding away from all the things you listed earlier, Tara, so that there's horrible crime and there's going to be tax hikes. And he's suing so that it won't go on the ballot, so you don't have a say in it. Like, if people would just open their eyes, like, hello, it's all right here.
Yep, exactly. And since you mentioned like the rising cost of living, let's talk about that, because California has just reached an all-time record high in terms of cost of living. So recent data from the cost of living index shows that the cost of living in California is 38% higher than the national average. Utilities are 22% higher than the national average, and housing is 97% higher than the national average. According to the California Association of Retailers, the median price of an existing single-family home reached a new record of over $908,000 in May. Now, for comparison,
can afford that? Like, who can afford $900,000? And that's the average price.
That's the average for a single family home. And in comparison, the national median, which to me is still crazy expensive, is $407,000. So that's double the cost of the average American home. And in May of this year, the average rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in California was almost $3,000. Like, for rent. That's so insane.
Yeah, there's no way anyone is paying for that. Like, how? You get
That's why all
roommates?
these kids are still living at home with their parents. But I want to mention this because while homeownership may be out of reach for hardworking Californians, in Los Angeles, homeless people who don't have shelter on Skid Row will now be housed in a brand new 19-story high-rise homeless shelter with 278 units called the Weingart Tower. And this is LA's largest permanent housing project. It has 228 studio apartments and 50 fully furnished one-bedroom apartments, including heating and air conditioning. The building has an entire floor of offices for caseworkers, and it has a ton of impressive amenities for residents, including a fitness center, an art room, a music room, a computer lab, a library, 6 common balcony terraces, and a cafe. The housing development will also be offering multiple services, including assistance with finding jobs, counseling on finances and budgeting, health and wellness classes, and on-site community events led by resident service coordinators. Like, Stephanie, is this a homeless shelter or a luxury hotel? Like,
Sure sounds like luxury to me.
yeah, and the overall cost of this project was $165 million, which makes the average cost of each unit $600,000. And who's funding it? Fucking California taxpayers.
Wow. Wow. Give it a year. Give it 1 year. I'm calling it right now. That luxury building will turn into a graffiti dump because when you have people that don't have any skin in the game and don't pay for something, they don't respect it. And let's just say it doesn't turn into a dump and it stays this like nice luxury apartment. There's 278 units. There are over 181,000 homeless people in California right now. How are they going to choose the 278 lucky ones? You know, it's like, oh, it's probably going to go to the illegal migrants. Like, that's what I would guess, because that's what they're doing in New York. And let's not forget that Newsom has already spent an unprecedented $18 billion on homelessness. And not only does he have no results to show, but the problem has gotten like so much worse. I mean, it's worse than it's ever been in history. So clearly it's not working. And I read this article from USC Health Journalism, and they were talking about how they're using these like tiny homes in California to help homeless people. And I guess this started years ago. The article was from 2022. And they were pointing out how they would put people in these tiny homes, homeless people, and they were almost immediately back on the streets. And those that did stay in the tiny home community brought crime and drugs into the tiny home community. So their conclusion at the end of this whole thing was that the problem is just too large and complex to fix.
Yeah, and I can speak to this firsthand because I worked Skid Row for several years when I was with LAPD, and working that assignment, I was interacting with homeless people on a daily basis all day. And from my personal experience, for the most part, I would say 95% of the people that I encountered were not like down on their luck and, needing help to get back on their feet. These were people purposely choosing the lifestyle of living on the streets because that's what it is. It's a lifestyle and a culture. And even when I worked there, there was plenty of housing available. I had conversations with both homeless people and with social workers confirming this fact. And the majority of the Skid Row population did not want to live in housing developments because they didn't want to comply with the rules of like not doing drugs, not having a bunch of people come and go at all hours. Like, they purposely chose to live in filth on the streets in dirty tents and structures made of like pallets and tarps. Why? Because there's nobody to enforce any rules, because the city of Los Angeles doesn't allow law enforcement to enforce any city codes, and they could do whatever they wanted, including like shitting directly on the street corner and sexually pleasuring themselves openly in public, both of which I witnessed on several occasions.
And you
Now,
couldn't arrest them for that, like indecent exposure?
for the indecent exposure, yes, but like for going to the bathroom in public, not if there was not a restroom available.
Oh
Like if there was not a
my
restroom within a certain
God.
number of feet away that was accessible, then it was not a crime,
Ugh,
which is
unbelievable.
insane to me. And like, is the problem the same now? I don't know, because I left LAPD 7 years ago. But I'm pretty sure the problem hasn't changed much, especially since the homeless population has just continued to increase. And I agree with you. I'm sure this, luxury tower is going to be trashed within a year and probably sooner. And from what I understand, this is just the first of 3 housing projects that the city is spending billions of dollars on. But speaking of illegal migrants, because you mentioned that, guess who's having a problem at the border now, Stephanie?
Is it
California.
California?
Yeah. Specifically, the area of downtown San Diego, which is actually one of the wealthier and more conservative areas of California. And this has become a top destination for illegal migrants, surpassing the problems at the Texas border, which I'm happy to report have decreased about 74% since Abbott has started enforcing like border control. But California, on the other hand, has seen a surge in illegal migration of 33%, and they haven't had migration to that extent since the early 1990s. And it's gotten to the point where even Newsom has had to like take action or at least pretend to take action. He's reportedly doubling the number of National Guard troops to crack down on drug smuggling. And according to the governor's office, drug task force operations are being increased from 155 service members to 400 service members being deployed. And Newsom puts out this stupid statement saying, quote, while the GOP play games and Mike Johnson searches for his spine, we're out here doing the work, end quote. Like, you're not doing shit. Because is California doing the work? Not according to some sources. The Washington Examiner reported that all these border agents will not be involved in apprehending illegal migrants who come across the border between ports of entry, because instead, what they're going to be doing is helping federal police search for fentanyl at the ports of entry. So is this going to like help the illegal migration problem? No. Are they going to get some drugs? Possibly, but that's not the only problem that we're having.
So Newsom can bring in the National Guard to the border, but when Abbott does it, he's sued by the Biden administration. I see how this works. Like,
Yeah.
it's such a shit show. And I mean, I truly feel bad for people that live in California. I mean, you know better than anyone because you still have family there. It's like, it's easy for me to be like, oh my gosh, why would you live there? Move. But when that is your home and your roots are there and everyone you know and your whole life is there, you can't just pick up and go sometimes. And it's really sad that it's such a beautiful, or it could be a beautiful place. I guess it once was a beautiful place and great weather and everything. And it's just gone to hell. Like, it's really sad. And I mean, again, like, this is how they get away with it. They're going to dangle these things like reparations bills and, oh, we're building a brand new, luxury complex, when really we know, like, first of all, that's probably not going to pass. And then the little band-aids, like the luxury condo, aren't going to last very long, and they're not going to even make a dent in the real problem. So that's how they get away with it and get people to keep voting for them. And it's just like, at some point, you have to open your eyes and realize what's right in front of you, and that the same people that have not fixed the problem in years and years and years are not going to fix the problem now. Like, maybe it's time California tries something new.
The governor that's trying to keep initiatives off the ballot with taking legal action, like, hello, wake up.
Yep. Yeah, he wants to keep the tax hikes off the ballot because he needs to pay $800 billion for reparations. He needs that money. Oh man. Yeah, it's such a shame, but I mean, it is what it is. Like, this is reality in California right now. So once again, we need to vote for Trump, and hopefully he actually eliminates income taxes like we talked about before. So just going to throw that in there at the end. But anyhow, thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope you found this at least entertaining. I know it's sad, but at least it gives us some interesting things to talk about. And yeah, we'll be here. What day is this, Tara? What are we even on?
Friday.
It's Friday. Okay, so we'll be here on Monday. Have a great weekend, everyone, and thanks for tuning in.